Why the Red Sox should definitely give Lucas Giolito the qualifying offer.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to give you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part, it's free. So make sure you tune in because Locked On is here for you every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. I am here again discussing the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, and we are getting into the part of the offseason in which more talks are going to start to come up, more potential trade options, more free agents that may be getting closer to making their decisions because the free agency window is going to open. And while the Red Sox look to improve their team and add guys who are going to make an impact on this team in 2026 and beyond, they also have to look within at the players they currently have on the roster, what they want to do about qualifying offers for players. So one of the biggest names that's in talks with this Red Sox team right now is Lucas Giolito. They absolutely should offer him the qualifying offer for 2026. And here's essentially why. So Lucas Giolito had a good season for the Boston Red Sox in 2025, and they probably don't get to where they are without him. And nobody really expected it either. It was kind of a situation in which he was hurt for the whole season in 2024, came back in 2025 with low expectations because people didn't really know how reliable he was going to be. And for a good portion of the season, he was pitching like a solid number 2 starting pitcher for the Red Sox. After missing all of 2024 and spending a few weeks on the IL in March and April of 2025, considering all of that, it was a really solid season. He pitched to a 3.41 ERA in 26 starts, and the Red Sox went 18-8 when he took the mound. Unfortunately, an elbow injury sustained at the very end of the regular season, which kept him off the playoff roster, which is tough because they definitely could have used him in that do or die game 3 at Yankee Stadium. He also triggered a vesting option because he reached the 140 inning threshold in the 2025 season. So the deal basically when it came to his contract was that if he threw at least 140 innings, it would become a mutual $19 million option for the 2026 season. If he ended up pitching less than 140 innings, it was a team-controlled $14 million option. So essentially, since he passed that threshold, it becomes a mutual option for $19 million. When they signed him originally, it was a 2-year, $38.5 million deal that included that conditional option for 2026. So he passed that threshold, which means that since it's now a mutual option, he could choose to go to free agency. The team could decide to let him walk and be a free agent. They could exercise the option, which he would more than likely decline and head to free agency because he's probably not going to get many more chances. So he definitely wants to maximize the opportunity that he's getting. So chances are, if the Red Sox were to exercise that option, he would likely decline his end of the mutual option for $19 million. So now we're in a situation where the qualifying offer is a thing. And the qualifying offer for this upcoming season in 2026 is $22.025 million, which represents a modest raise for him. So they could offer him the qualifying offer, which would throw the $19 million option out the door. Essentially, that would put the Red Sox out $3 million extra if he accepted it. So that's an option that they could do. If they were to give him the qualifying offer and he were to decline it, though, the benefit to that would be the Red Sox would be entitled to draft compensation the same way they were last offseason when Nick Pivetta left for the San Diego Padres. So that gives them an option for, if he declines it, to have draft compensation. If he accepts it, they would feel comfortable having him back on a 1-year deal if he accepted it. So essentially, with all things being equal, the Red Sox would not feel uncomfortable offering him that $22.025 million qualifying offer. And here's why they should. Because if they offer it to him and he doesn't accept it, at least they have the draft compensation. If he accepts it, then okay, they're paying him an extra $3 million than what they were supposed to pay him anyway to hopefully be productive again. And he provides some much needed pitching depth for the Red Sox. After the season he had in 2025, it's easy to feel comfortable with bringing him back in 2026. Now, there's no guarantees he's going to put up the same level of productivity in 2026 that he did in 2025. So that's definitely something that the Red Sox are going to need to think about, is say he's not as productive as he was in 2025 and he takes a big step back and he's not nearly as reliable. They're only committing to 1 year of him. There's no locking in past that. So if he declines and isn't as effective in 2026, then at least they know it's only a 1-year deal. So they know that if he ends up not performing to the level they want him to, they just don't bring him back in 2027. So it's kind of a low risk, high reward scenario here. Kind of like when they signed him originally, they said, you know what, we don't know how sharp he's going to be, but let's give it a shot and see where he's at and see how he performs. And it ended up working out really well for the Red Sox because they ended up getting a guy who was able to go out there and be able to be really effective and be really good. So that's a plus. So say the Red Sox bring him back on a 1-year deal and he's really effective again. Then you look at the next season and say, okay, for 2027, what do we envision for our starting rotation? Do we see him being a part of that or not? And then you reevaluate at that point. If he comes back and he declines, then, oh, well, they're, paying him for the season, and then he just goes on his merry way for the following year. Lucas Giolito knows he's under pressure right now. He knows that he's not going to get a lot more chances, so he knows his best option right now is to perform very well in Boston to continue to secure shorter term deals so that he can stay in the league for as long as he can. So for him, mentally, he knows that his back is kind of against the wall. So that's more incentive for him to pitch well because he's going to want to prove that he still has it and that he still belongs in this league, even if he starts to decline a little bit. So with where he's going to be at, it definitely makes sense for the Red Sox to offer him the qualifying offer, especially because with the elbow injury that he faced at the end of the season, the Red Sox said there was no structural damage there, but the mere hint of an issue with the elbow, which has undergone tendon transplant surgery twice, may give the Red Sox and other teams pause when it comes to committing to him for the 2026 season. So obviously there is some hesitancy there, but since they have said that they don't feel like his injury will be a lingering thing heading into next season, it definitely makes sense for them to at least extend him the qualifying offer. And if he accepts that, then you have another veteran in the clubhouse still to continue to surround the young guys with, because the more veteran talent you can surround the young players with when they're earlier on in their careers, the better off they are going to be later on. And Lucas Giolito is a guy who can represent somebody who has gone through struggle and has been able to bounce back from that. He's dealt with injuries and he's still here pitching. So he's a guy that can help the young guys through some times of struggle when they're facing maybe an injury and it's hard on them physically and emotionally, or they're in a slump or something at the plate. or if they're a pitcher struggling on the mound as of their last few outings, he's somebody who mentally can help change their mindset to positive to be able to bounce back from that. So there are positives to having Lucas Giolito here, and there's really not a huge level of harm to bringing him back. And if he declines it, you get draft compensation. So a no-brainer to offer him the qualifying offer. So we'll see if they do that. And coming up, what could the potential starting rotation look like if they were to bring Lucas Giolito back? If you're looking to score last-minute tickets to any sort of event, definitely be sure to check out Game Time for sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, you name it. Any live event, Game Time is the perfect place to get your tickets. I use it all the time. I actually was on it the other day looking for tickets for a college football game. And there are so many discounted prices compared to other ticketing vendors. So you know you're getting the cheapest tickets that you can. Also, I love zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So if the Red Sox bring back Lucas Giolito for 2026, say they offer him the qualifying offer and he accepts it, which they definitely should at least extend it to him because he could decline it, who knows, and just exercise his right to free agency. And if he does, the Red Sox get trade compensation. But if they extend the qualifying offer and he accepts it and he's with this pitching staff in 2026, should he be relied on as a key piece in the starting rotation? No. This is where the offseason becomes very important because the Red Sox still need to acquire a number 2 starting pitcher, likely from the outside, not within the organization, not banking on somebody turning into a true number 1 starting pitcher. They need to go and they need to try to acquire somebody who's going to be a true number 2 to put behind Garrett Crochet. For example, if you acquire Joe Ryan, would love that, would be a great trade option. Then you stick him into the rotation behind Garrett Crochet. So then you essentially have Crochet and Ryan as your 1 and 2. No doubt about it. That's your 1-2 punch. The 3 in that case would likely be Brayan Bello. So if you stick Brayan Bello in that spot, then you're looking at essentially a rotation that has a good 1-2-3. Brayan Bello struggled in the month of September this season. We need to get that squared away with him. But the version of Brayan Bello that we saw after he came back from injury for the rest of the season, all the way up until September, that was a really strong version of Brayan Bello. That was a guy who was able to go out there and pitch really effectively to the level of a number 3 starter. Now, in some of his outings, he looked like a number 2, but generally I would classify Brayan Bello as a number 3. So there's your 1-2-3, theoretically, Garrett Crochet, Joe Ryan, or question mark number 2 starter, whoever you decide to acquire in the offseason, which needs to happen, Brayan Bello as a 3. Then it leaves options because you have Connolly early, who showed a ton of potential out of the rotation in 2025. There's a question surrounding him and whether he's even going to be here in 2026 because you have options to be able to potentially trade him and include him in a package for a really solid number 2 starting pitcher. You'd have to include other players in that, primarily likely one of your outfielders too. But if you include Connolly early in a trade, then you don't have him available out of the rotation, so then you take him out of the equation. But say you don't trade him this offseason. He definitely has earned a spot in the starting rotation. So then you have him maybe as a number 4. Then you're looking at Giolito, question mark number 2, Brayan Bello, and Connolly early as your 4. Then you need to fill that 5th starting rotation spot. And you have options to be able to do that. Tanner Houck is out from basically the entirety of the season, so he's probably out. Hunter Dobbins, another one whose injury is a long recovery process as well. So question mark surrounding Hunter Dobbins. So you can't really rely on sticking him 100% in the rotation to start the season. Richard Fitz, another one, recovering from injury. So because those guys are question marks, if you want a definitive number 5 option, you could go with Kyle Harrison, who did get a dip into pitching for the Red Sox at the end of the 2025 season. If the Red Sox liked what they saw from him, he could be stuck as that number 5. And because he's a number 5, you don't necessarily need him to be as reliable as the others. So if you're still unsure about Kyle Harrison and what he's actually going to bring to the table, then fine. You have him as the number 5 starter, and then you don't really have to worry as much about relying on him to be as reliable as you would a guy like Garrett Crochet. If you have Hunter Dobbins come back and he's able to recover smoothly and he's able to pitch out of the Red Sox rotation, then you utilize Hunter Dobbins for sure in that rotation. And then you can say, okay, we're going to use Dobbins and Harrison as the number 4 and 5. Or you say we're going to use Dobbins and Early, if he's still here, as the 4 and the 5. Then there's Peyton Tolley. Peyton Tolley, to me, should be pitching out of the bullpen. He doesn't really have enough of an arsenal yet to where he can succeed as a high-level starter. And that's fine because he's so young. The Red Sox really brought him through the system very quickly. And I almost feel like they rushed him too quickly into coming up and pitching for the major league team. He has a really solid fastball that certainly plays at the major league level. But until he develops his secondary pitches a little bit more, it's hard to justify trusting him to throw 6 innings or so in a game and be reliable, because once hitters start to see him multiple times through the order, it's going to be a lot easier for them to figure him out if he's primarily just relying on his fastball. And again, there's nothing wrong with that because he's still young. But for right now, I'm keeping him in the bullpen until he's able to figure out his secondary pitches that work for him. So I'm keeping Peyton Tolley in the bullpen. So then you have guys to play around with, like I said, between Dobbins and then potentially Kyle Harrison and potentially Connolly Early if he's still here. So where does that leave Lucas Giolito? Lucas Giolito, to me, if he comes back in 2026, would be used primarily as a depth piece. If you have a starting pitcher who goes down with an injury, Giolito would be a great guy to throw into that mix as that 5th starter to be able to leverage your rotation to its maximum potential. So say Brian Bayo goes down with an injury partway through the season and you need another starter, Lucas Giolito could be a logical fit to throw in there. Or if they want to go with a 6-man rotation in 2026, which was something they kind of talked about doing in 2025 before they started dealing with all these injuries, then you definitely could stick Giolito in the rotation and he could no doubt serve as that 6th starting pitcher. But where I see Giolito fitting if he comes back in 2026 is at a multi-inning reliever type of role. Because you have guys who are good for 1 to 2 innings. And the Red Sox had this problem in 2025 where they tried to stretch guys out to pitch more than 1 inning that weren't really meant to pitch more than 1 inning, and it backfired. You have a guy in Giolito who you know can pitch multiple innings because his experience is as a starter, but it's not putting as much pressure physically on his arm because of the injuries that he has dealt with to risk throwing him in there and expecting him to throw every 5 days 90 to 100 pitches. I mean, it's just not realistic to put that kind of pressure on him and expect him to be as effective down the stretch as you would want him to be. So if you want to keep Lucas Giolito around because of both his presence and what he showed in 2025, there's certainly room to do that. And he's perfect to bring into a game on a day where the pitcher that's starting that game doesn't necessarily have it, and maybe they get pulled early and you need a reliever to pitch multiple innings because you don't want to burn the entire bullpen. Because early on in the season, we saw certain rotation guys who weren't pitching deep into games, and it led to guys out of the pen, specifically Brennan Bernardino and Greg Weisser in particular, being completely burned out because they were being used so much early on. So you have a way to be able to at least prevent some of that if you can call on Lucas Giolito to pitch 3 innings out of the pen before you go to somebody else. And that way, then his arm hopefully is able to stay a little bit healthier and be able to last for the entirety of the season because you're not putting as much pressure on it and making him throw a starting pitcher's length outing every time he's out there. So that's the perfect spot where I see Lucas Giolito going if he stays. And the starting rotation with hopefully the acquisition of another starting pitcher that can throw as the number 2 behind Garrett Crochet would be ideal, because then you can go with Crochet, question mark number 2 starting pitcher, who hopefully is a no doubt proven number 2 starting pitcher. Then you go and you put Brian Bayo in as the number 3, and then you can play around with the young guys and guys coming back from injury to fill out the rest of the rotation, but there's no pressure to put Giolito there. And this is what's great about having pitcher flexibility, something that the Red Sox have not had in a while, is you can be more flexible with who you throw in where, and you can play around with the idea of trying out different players in different spots to see if it works. The Red Sox haven't really had that luxury in a while of being able to do that. And now that they do, they definitely do need to take advantage of that and put guys into areas where it's appropriate for them. So again, another benefit to having Lucas Giolito back would be it provides more options and more flexibility, and being able to throw him in where it makes sense compared to where you're throwing other guys in. So again, there's so many benefits to bring Lucas Giolito back, but do not rely on him being a guy who throws every 5th day out of the rotation if you don't absolutely have to. So that would be the ideal starting rotation for me. What the Red Sox shouldn't be doing is banking on an internal starter turning into a number 2 miraculously for the 2026 season. That really should be somebody who comes from the outside. And if they do that, and they acquire somebody who comes from the outside, then you're looking at a really solid rotation going into 2026. Look at the Dodgers rotation right now. A bunch of guys who are incredibly reliable and could probably be the ace on another team. You want to get a number 2 starting pitcher who could be an ace in other places, and that's how you know that he is a true number 2. And that's the logic that the Red Sox have to have going into this offseason. So we'll see what they decide to do with the rotation. But coming up, who was the 2025 MVP for the Boston Red Sox? It's that time of year where there's so many sports going on. So what better way to get in on the action than with FanDuel and this great new deal? Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. You can win lots of money on FanDuel because you can bet on so many different sports, and that starts with football today. So make sure you download the app now. There's been a lot of debate over who was the 2025 MVP for the Boston Red Sox. One could argue that it should be Trevor Story. I mean, he had a really strong season with the Boston Red Sox. He led the team in RBIs with 96 and finished with 25 home runs and 31 stolen bases. This was the first fully healthy season he has had in a Red Sox uniform, and it really paid off for him. He played in 157 games, taking advantage of his first chance to stay healthy and providing consistent production. Also, his leadership and defense were beneficial for the Red Sox because he provided crucial offensive and defensive leadership, even though his defense declined slightly at the end of the season. He was still a sound defender at shortstop, and he helped the Red Sox infield to prevent a lot of errors that could have happened otherwise. And they still made plenty of infield defensive errors, but a lot of them weren't at the expense of Story. And towards the end of the season, they certainly were a little bit. But overall, if you look at the overarching season that he had, that offensive and defensive leadership that he did provide was very much crucial. So it would be a good argument to say that he's the team MVP. Then there's Garrett Crochet, who was no doubt the pitching ace, won 18 games with a 2.59 ERA, 249 strikeouts, and he led the American League in innings pitched. He made a major impact because he was a dominant pitcher who significantly elevated the team from a 500 record to a playoff contender. He was also acquired in the offseason and rewarded the team's investment with a dominant first season. So he really made the trade feel worth it at the end of the day, because the Red Sox gave up some big name prospects for him, guys who definitely have a lot of talent and potential in the majors. But Garrett Crochet made it all worth it by coming in his first season and just really proving to people that he's a no doubt number one starter. There are a couple other considerations. You could theoretically consider Roman Anthony, a rookie outfielder who many believe was the most impactful player for a stretch of the season, though he missed time due to injury. And people do think sometimes that he was the most impactful player because of the fact that he did so much for the Red Sox lineup. And once he got hurt, the lineup took a major decline. And it was clear that they really needed Roman in there as the leadoff hitter. And in the last month or so of the season, when he missed due to injury, it was a huge hole that needed to be filled and wasn't. So that's why it feels like he might have been the most valuable player on this team. Aroldis Chapman is another good option because he served as the closer and was considered a dominant force in the Red Sox bullpen. Nobody expected him to have the season that he had out of the pen, but he helped make the Red Sox bullpen the best in the American League in 2025. And there were lots of close games that they won because of him. Close games that in 2024 they don't win. And granted, in the first part of the 2025 season, the Red Sox really struggled in one-run games and couldn't win those, but that was a lot of times due to when they were losing by a run and they couldn't get that big hit to be able to win that game. Aroldis Chapman would go out there and seal the deal as the team's closer, and it made a huge impact on this team. So considering all of those factors, those are definitely the biggest options for guys who could be considered the team MVP, but I am going with Garrett Crochet. There's just something about having that true number one starter. It's something the Red Sox really haven't had in a long time, and being able to have a guy who you can rely on to be that true number one is fantastic. And it just made so much of a difference for this Red Sox team, because if they rolled out a rotation without a true number one starting pitcher, they are not a playoff team in 2025. And they certainly had their struggles. There were definitely guys who weren't delivering at the level they needed to deliver at. And that was certainly a topic of conversation that has happened between the Red Sox front office and for me on the show during the offseason is what the Red Sox need to do to improve for 2026. But Garrett Crochet is definitely not part of that equation. He's part of the equation with guys who delivered to the level they needed to deliver at. And when you have a guy who goes out there every 5 days and you know you can rely on him to go out there and get the job done, that to me is the most valuable player to your team. You know that when Crochet is pitching, that you're going to go out there and likely get a really strong performance. And we really haven't felt like we've had that truly since Chris Sale was with the Boston Red Sox. There hasn't really been a true number one starting pitcher that the Red Sox have confidently been able to say is an ace. No doubt about it, until getting Garrett Crochet. And because the Red Sox were a playoff team in 2025, now we're saying, okay, continue to build the rotation around Garrett Crochet, because he's going to be your number one now for years to come. And if you can get solid arms behind him that can fill out that rotation, then you're going to have a really solid rotation moving forward. And pitching wins championships. In reality, at the end of the day, we see teams win championships because their pitching is able to keep the opposing team's offense at bay. For example, the Seattle Mariners are a team that doesn't necessarily have the best offense in baseball, and they won't necessarily go and explode for a lot of runs, but their starting pitching rotation is top tier, and that's what got them to their spot in the postseason. You need to have really good pitching to win in October, and that starts with having a true ace. And because they have that in Garrett Crochet, that's not something that you can just find really easily. So to me, he's the most valuable player for the team, because the Red Sox definitely aren't looked at as a playoff team without Crochet in that rotation. Obviously, really good players on this team that also could have been in the conversation. And it's really exciting to think about the future of this Red Sox team because of that. But no doubt I'm looking at Garrett Crochet as the team MVP for 2025. And who is it going to be for 2026? Time will obviously tell. But I really appreciate you tuning into Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen of every single day. Make sure to also check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. It discusses every game every single night until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Make sure you check out that show next. And as always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I'll catch you on the flip side.